there, Mayor.
And I went to the, you're okay, man, everybody else is amazing.
Yeah, there.
Always want to serve my beer boards. That's why I beer board.
We needed something.
I don't know what it is.
Had two.
Y'all look like you're pretty serious.
Yeah. Didn't think it was a spur.
Somebody said,
We did, and denied one and got some questions about another one. Got to come back.
That's what I saw in the beginning.
Well, that's my normal everyday exercise. I play tennis. I have to take a day.
I'm wavering. I was originally, but after I read this letter from
The
Lee,
last month since we last met.
Yeah.
And it seems to help a little bit. I'm sore just now. About 2 days it'll show up. But the morning after it's no thing.
We're to the age now.
My donut.
We just feel
If I didn't get my donut this morning, man, y'all have been so. I didn't get my donut this morning.
I just don't feel like it's
we had stuff. I don't have you. We need to link the time. And we don't have. That's got to be the street.
3 miles with Jim, and a couple miles in Tristan.
I didn't bring my
You know, he's when it's raining, don't sweep the streets. Just keep it just sweep the streets. That's the way they do.
Hey, how y'all doing this morning?
Say, man, I ain't get my donut this morning.
No, still
I can get you one, warm it up here.
Oh, it's time to roll now, man.
I can still be
I
late.
come and get my donut, man.
I can go ahead and get you one right now.
Too late now.
No, it's never too late.
No, it is. We can pray.
Go get the, I can go get your donut.
Oh, I can't get my donut up there.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my donut.
There's no rule you can't.
Yeah, when?
Eat a donut. You can eat a donut.
Too late.
Well, Nita, she just came out. Yeah, we got out.
It's across the street. It goes out, closer to Allen. Out where Arlington comes out.
Okay.
I don't think that's which one, because there's another one right across the street.
It's bad when your house is divided.
Oh, really?
Tell me about it. I sure read Alabama Law. Well, we're both on the same side. Kids are my grandchildren.
Did they just regret it? They were a split marriage.
Okay, I do know.
He's been awful quiet here lately. Thank you, man. Thank you, man.
Don't think so.
Well, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the March 2nd, 2010 meeting of the Jackson City Council to order. We'll ask Councilmember Frank Newdecker to lead us in our invocation and pledge. If you would, please rise.
May the Lord thy God welcome home all those lost to the tragedies of the world this week. May the Lord raise them up and bear them on the breath of dawn. May they shine like the sun. May he hold them in the palm of his hand. May the Lord God bless those on this council and in this city and guide us on a path of freedom and righteousness. God, when we are wrong, mold us that we might be willing to change. And when we are right, dear Lord God, make us easy to live with. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Anita, you can show all councilmen present for the meeting, and we'll have item 4 is approval of minutes of the February 2nd, 2010 meeting. Is there any corrections or additions to those minutes? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve. Okay, hearing no objections, the minutes will be approved February 2nd, 2010. This is a time for invitation for public comment on any item under new business. If there's anyone here who would like to come up and speak on any of those items for approval or in opposition to, now's the time to do it. Yes, please, come on up. If you would identify yourself for the council, please.
I'm Leah Dahlstrom, and I'm here to talk about the juvenile curfew.
Okay.
My name is Leah Dahlstrom, and I'm 15 years old. I attend Jackson Christian School, where I make straight A's and B's and take some of the offered honors classes. I'm also very involved in my church youth group. I'll be receiving my license to drive in July, and I'm very excited about the new freedom and opportunities that comes with it. This proposed curfew concerns me, so I'm here today to discuss with you some reasons why you should vote against this law. First of all, this simply takes away our freedom. America is known as the land of the free, and when I think of various foreign countries, I think of how their people are not allowed to come and go as they wish. I have always counted my freedom as one of my blessings, and it means a lot to me and my friends. We have enjoyed our freedom and respected it. I feel that those of us who obey our laws should not be punished because of the few that don't. And if those few don't abide by the laws now, why will they obey this one? My second point is that it is the parents' job to be responsible for their children and their actions, and handing this over to the government is just another way that our society is weakened. My third reason is concerning the convenience of being able to transport ourselves to various activities. Every family that has teenagers stays busy. It is more than convenient for us and our parents when we can take ourselves to the many sports and activities we are involved in. Parents are often not able to take us to all the places we need to be because of their own jobs and activities. My fourth point concerns our local economy. Many school events such as football games, school plays, and etc. don't end until 10 o'clock or later, and the majority of high school students enjoy eating and visiting with each other afterwards at Starbucks, Sonic, and many other places. If this curfew is set, we would not be allowed enough time to do this. This would definitely decrease the business of many local restaurants. Movies at the movie theaters are shown after this curfew as well. This includes the major midnight premieres of Twilight and Harry Potter that always sell out. This incoming money would also decrease, and as you understand, the decrease in sales revenue decreases the sales tax coming to the city of Jackson. My fifth and final point is the way this law will be enforced. I understand that the law allows exceptions to religious and school events, but there is no way for the police to know where we are headed to or coming from. This is bound to lead to false accusations. These are just a few of the things I would like for you to take into careful consideration. Thank you for listening to my opinions and doing what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Billy Moore, and the issue I have with juvenile curfew is the exception clause. You have an exception clause in section 104, and it's 11 that says that exercising any privilege specifically granted by state law. And lawyer, Mr. Cobb, said that the example they gave was children that go hunting and fishing. Now, not all, we know most of the people go hunting and fishing in this community are white children. You know, a lot of the crimes that committed are not being committed by all whites or all blacks. But the ones that you punishing, you know, are the ones that abide by the law. You know, those who abide by the law, if you're gonna enforce this curfew, you know, I mean, you should not leave out any. If it's a state law that a child has a right to go by his way, you know, how would you pick and choose the ones you would let do it, like the hunting and fishing? And secondly, the enforcement of it. You have parents who don't have records, but with this curfew, you would allow the police department to compile a record against this parent for something that maybe she's at work, maybe he's at work, and the child's out. But the parent bears the burden of this child's action. Thirdly, you know, the police department here in Jackson has been very hostile toward black youth. You have memos in the police department called Black Children Thugs. A Councilman Dodd was at a meeting the other night. He said that you would tell the police not to harass the kids. You know, if a mayor had to tell the police department not to harass the black kids during this curfew, you know what I mean? Something is inherently wrong with the curfew policy. So I say this curfew it's gonna harm more than hurt. And by the American Bar Association, it said juvenile crime only comes between 3 and 6. The majority of juvenile crime starts between 3 and 6 in the afternoon. So what did this curfew curtail? You know what I mean? Except for a free movement of young men and women in this community. So I think this curfew should be voted down. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, I'd like to clear up a statement. I said that I asked, and I think some council members asked for the police not to harass. I didn't make, the mayor made the statement do anything. I made that statement and asked the police if this passed to make sure it's gonna be citywide. So I never said that the mayor made that statement.
Well, I stand corrected, and I
Okay, thank
apologize
you.
for misquoting you. But if you got to ask the police department not to harass young men and women, something's wrong with the police department.
That's
Thank you.
understandable.
Thank you. I've been accused a lot worse, so that's fine. Anyone else that'd like to speak on any item under new business, either in support of or in opposition to? Please indicate now. Okay, we'll close the time for public comment then and go to first readings. Item 6 is consideration of ordinance to amend Title 11, Chapter 6, Section 11-604, manufacturing, selling, carrying dangerous weapons, the City of Jackson Codified Ordinance. Any comments on this item? If not, is
Mayor,
there?
I'll just make a quick comment, since I brought it before the attention of the council. In the process of doing the codification of all the city ordinances, came to our attention that there are a couple of items that were against state law, or state law wouldn't allow us to do that. This was one of them, and so I just wanted to kind of clean our ordinances up to match what we're entitled to do and match the state law.
Okay, this is first reading on this ordinance, so I'll open a public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak in support of or in opposition to the passage of this ordinance. If not, then we'll close the public hearing, and is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Have a motion made, second?
Second.
Second. Any
Question.
Sure.
The only question that I had basically was for the attorneys, which I don't see are present today. And that was whether we strike the entire language off 11604 and reference the state law. And that was what we were looking for an answer for, but they weren't there. Could I make an amendment, or would, to just go ahead and make that, strike that entire language and reference state law?
You can do whatever you want. I didn't catch you. You're talking about just striking the whole thing?
Striking the whole thing and refer to state law.
I would just advise the council, until we do have some legal here to direct us on this matter, that we may, since they have seen the ordinance that we have.
I'll strike that then, yeah. That's all right, and we'll bring it back.
Okay, is there any other discussion from council? We have a motion second. Council, please vote.
And the vote is unanimous.
Item 2 under first readings, consideration of ordinance to amend Appendix A, campaign finance of the City of Jackson Codified Ordinances.
Mayor, this is along the same line on that codification. In the process of trying to reduce the amount that people can spend on political campaigns, it came to my attention that the Attorney General has ruled that the amount that an individual can spend on their own campaign is unconstitutional. So I was trying to clean that up also in the ordinance.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, for adoption of this ordinance. Let me open the public hearing, since this is first reading, and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak in support of or in opposition to the passage of this ordinance. Okay, we have a motion, a second, discussion. Council, please vote.
The vote is unanimous.
Okay, item 7, second readings. Number 1 is consideration of a juvenile curfew ordinance. think council had requested some additional information. Hopefully you have that. Is there a motion for approval? Dr. Lake is here. Dr. Lake, you've been requested, if you would, to come up and
How about Captain Corley too, since he's there?
Captain Corley, you want to come up and assist Dr. Lake, if you would?
Mr. Mayor, I had a couple questions for juvenile court services as well.
Okay. We have only two, won't y'all come up near the front, and then as the questions, you may occupy one of the chairs.
It doesn't matter. We can go in the order that the council people.
Captain, come on up and take a chair, if you would. Thank you. Okay, questions from council?
Yeah, I just had one for Captain Corley and Dr. Lake too. You've had a little more time to go through all this and some new information since we voted the first time for this. I just wanted to check with you that you still feel this is a good idea, that you're still supporting in your group.
Yes, sir, Councilman. I feel this is a good idea, and as I told you last month, I think this is the first step that we need to take to get the curfew law in place, and then we need to deal with the truancy and the day side of this. I think both are critically important to this process and to making Jackson safer. So after looking at the data, I still feel that this is still an important step we need to take.
That was my question.
But
You
it's
had a
both-
lot of new data had come in
Well,
since then.
And the latest research, the 2005 article that we looked at is the most comprehensive study of 65 cities with populations over 180,000, and clearly over from 1980 to 2000, 1984 to 2002, and that clearly showed that the curfews in those cities did have an impact in the drop in crime, so in offenses by youth. So that's the most comprehensive, most recent study, and it showed did have an impact.
Thank you.
Dr. Lake, by the same token, I'm sure you're familiar with the literature that goes absolutely opposite of what you just said.
Correct, yes, sir, and I
there's a lot
reflect-
of information out there, and a lot of studies that have been done that have shown that it has no effect. I guess in looking at the statistics, you know that there are a large number of crimes that occur in the after-school hours. In fact, the majority occurred during that time. Did your task force look at after-school programs as not a solution, but as one tool to use to help curtail if we are in fact trying to curtail youth violence or youth crime?
Councilman, that's a great point. As I said, I think we need to look in this as totality for our youth, and the first step is the curfew. And I think for our city and our community to be successful, then we have to look at the day side. We have to look during the school hours, and we have to look at that critical 3 to 6 p.m. And I have been in, we have this group that is working on this that the mayor asked to put together, and Amy Jones and I from Juvenile Court have met about that and are working on a couple of projects and some grants to actually look at where our after-school programs are in this community and where the gaps in service are. So I think that's an excellent point.
Okay, and I will speak with you about that as well.
Oh,
I have some
good.
information that can be
Good.
helpful in that sense too. My second question is in the area of performance outcomes, and you're a grant writer, so you know what I'm talking about in that area. How will we measure whether or not this program is successful?
Well, I think we're going to look at juvenile arrest. We'll look at offenses where they could be a suspect, correct, Captain? And then the third measure that we would use is that the two that we would use, plus the third would be the actual cases that get to juvenile court.
Okay, so are there some specific goals as it relates to percentages? For instance, we want to reduce youth crime by 10% or 15%.
No, but that sounds real good.
Okay.
I mean, if you have some parameters you want to put around that, we would certainly welcome those.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilman.
The document that you gave us, both Thursday and earlier, the juvenile curfews, the research papers, it makes a lot of statements in regards to numbers. But I've yet to see anything coming from any of those reports that I looked up that showed any statistical information to back any of those numbers up.
About any, sir, I'm sorry.
Any of those numbers, to back any of those numbers up. And I can be specific if you'd like me to be. It showed a report that Monrovia, California, there was a curfew that was studied by Riccardi, I believe that's correct, it was in 1997. Showed a 32% decline in residential burglaries after the adoption of the curfew. However, what they didn't tell you was that that year was, they had a crime reduction of 40% already, even prior to the curfew. So I'm wondering how much of this is really relevant to what we're trying to do. One of the things I had hoped for during the last month is that we would have some more numbers coming out of the city's reports. And I know we got a list of numbers the other day, and I have to admit, I didn't get a chance to really understand those numbers, and I'd like to. But I'm not sure we're gonna see the impact that you will hope us to see. The other thing that bothered me was that, and I'll ask this question, maybe you can answer it for me. The numbers that we did see showed 2,000 crimes, juvenile crimes during a particular year, most of those crimes during the day. And yet I remember when I was on the Safe Neighborhood Committee, we had a total of about 5,000 crimes in any one particular year on average. Are you telling me that 20% of all the crimes committed in the city of Jackson are by juveniles?
Haven't compiled that exact number, but I would go as far to say that there is a good number of crimes committed by juveniles across the board, whether it be during the proposed curfew hours or not. And it would be a larger number than I think most would normally think. To say that it'd be 20%, I don't know that.
I mean, I'm just
numbers
taking
that
the
way.
crunchy numbers that throw.
I haven't looked at the numbers that way, but to say it's overall 20%, I don't know.
I think, Councilman, as I've said a couple of times, we need to look at this, as we deal with youth in a totality. We need to deal with the day side and the night side, and I think communities that have been successful deal with both. So this is the first step that this committee that the mayor has asked to come together to really focus on this. Is the first step is the curfew, and now we're working on the truancy side and the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. That Councilman Brooks brought up. All of that, we need to do all of this in totality. We need to deal with this as a complete picture. This is just the first step of that. So I truly believe you have to deal with it, and I will tell you this, and I will give you this article if you would like to see it, this Impact of Juvenile Curfew Law, the most comprehensive study from the University of Michigan Department of Economics that looked at the 65 cities. This is the most comprehensive, most recent study that showed, in fact, juvenile curfews using Uniform Crime Report data did have a significant impact and reduction of youth crime and youth victimizations. And I think what you will see is the other studies picked a community here or there. This looked at 65 across our country. So I think it's a much more comprehensive study and one that we should pay attention to.
I didn't get a copy of that. Would you mind? Well, digitally it'd be neater. Let's not cut trees if we can help it. I guess I have another question in regards to some of the data that was given to us earlier, because this is the data that we've got to work with, not the one you've got there. The data that we have to work with are coming from a variety of small cities. Some of them I even know, like it's Zela, Washington, which reported a decrease from 98 arrests from 1994 to 57 in 1995, which is supposedly a 42% decrease, but they don't tell us that it's only got a 3,000 population, and the square footage of that particular town would fit in, downtown Jackson would be it. I mean, that's it. That's their entire, so I'm having a little problems in these comparisons of what we're making a judgment on. And I hate to say we're getting ready to remove the freedoms of individuals that in a single vote, and it bothers me. That really does. I'm not gonna get into the question of constitutionality because everybody's got their own opinion of that, but I'm working on the numbers alone, and I don't see anything here that's telling me we're going to be making any measurable change yet. Okay, that's.
Councilman
thank you.
Ellis?
Just very briefly, Dr. Lake, you said this was a first step towards that. We're not constitutionally required to do a night curfew first. We could have tackled the day problem first. Is that right?
Well, the reason we tackled the night piece first is we really logistically with the timing cannot get anything in place till next school year. So we felt it was important to start with the curfew because we could start that in July and then follow up with the day side soon thereafter.
So with the committee that met, did they look at all these stats that we have in front of us? Or was it just let's make up a curfew and then we'll try to justify the means at the end?
Oh, no, we looked at data.
We looked at the data that we have in front of us
Well,
today.
we didn't look at it as in detailed as we did, but we looked at it in the aggregate. You asked for it to be broken out by crime and such like that. But we did have data that was pulled.
Because we have to justify the means of restricting this time period. And I want to make sure that I understand what you gave us. With juvenile offenses from '07 to '08 to '09, the number of offenses actually decreased during the curfew hours.
Yes, it went up in 2008 and then went back down, didn't it?
Well, I've got '07,
I don't-
17%, '08, 17%.
Okay, that was the other one that went down.
'09, 13%. Now, my question is what is this comparison with, because we have to make a comparison, I think, apples to apples. What is the percentage of this during curfew hours to adult infractions? And is it statistically significant?
Why would you want to compare it to the adult infractions?
Well, if we have a out-of-control juvenile population, crime or whatever during this time period, you would think that they would be 30, 40, 50, 60%. And that's what we're trying to curtail. I mean, one of the standards that we have to meet in the even on the intermediate standard is a rational basis for imposing this. So if it's statistically insignificant as compared to adult crime, then doesn't meet the rational basis test.
I don't know the answer to that. Did you look at that?
I don't have those numbers. Certainly, we can get them. I think much like Mr. Newdeck was referring to, is it so much percentage of the entire crime?
Well, is it statistically significant?
Statistically, yes.
I mean, it's not enough to say we've got 5%. If it's 5% of 10, that's the big
Right.
deal. If it's 5% of 10,000, it's not statistically significant.
We drew the data that was requested at the time. It
Right.
was break it down by time and then break it down juvenile offenses by time and by crime.
And you would agree with me that shows a decrease over the years.
The overall numbers during those curfew hours have gone slightly down between 2008 and 2009.
Now, I want to go back to this study that you referenced, Dr. Lake. It's 65 communities, is that right?
Correct.
And the demographics of those, that's cities over 180,000.
Correct.
How does Jackson compare socioeconomically, educationally to these cities that were listed?
Oh, I can show you the list, and I bet you're going to find a lot of them are just like Jackson. The population just may be bigger.
And then lastly, the amount of crime or teen or juvenile violence, not violence, but juvenile crime that is being referenced.
It's Akron, Ohio, Albuquerque, Anaheim, Anchorage, Arlington, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Austin, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland, Baton Rouge, Birmingham, Alabama, Boston, Matthew. You want me to continue with the list? Buffalo, New York, Charlotte, North Carolina, Cincinnati, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Colorado Springs, Corpus Christi, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Denver, Colorado, Des Moines, Iowa, Detroit, El Paso, Texas, Fort Worth, Fresno, Garland, Texas, Glendale, California, Greensboro, North Carolina, Houston, Texas, Jackson, Mississippi, Jacksonville, Florida, Jersey City, New York, Kansas City, Missouri, Lexington, Fayette, Kentucky, Lincoln, Nebraska, Long Beach, California, Los Angeles, California, Louisville, Kentucky, Lubbock, Texas, Madison, Wisconsin, Mesa, Arizona, Miami, Florida, Mobile, Alabama, New Orleans, Louisiana, New York, Newark, Norfolk, Virginia, Oklahoma City, Omaha, Nebraska, Phoenix, Arizona, Raleigh, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Rochester, New York, Sacramento, California, San Antonio, San Diego, San Jose, Seattle, Shreveport, St. Paul, St. Petersburg, Tampa, Toledo, Tulsa, Virginia Beach, Wichita, Kansas. You want me to continue reading?
And
That's
I guess
all.
my question is, I know we don't match up with an Atlanta, Georgia.
No,
I know
but-
that we're not same as Birmingham, Alabama.
But I bet if you look at the percentages of population, we might be close to them.
Or El Paso, and I think it's
The-
more than just percentage of population. I think there's socioeconomic factors.
Well, I think it
there's
might-
geography factors, and that's my question is how do we match up to these,
Well, I would-
especially in terms of our teenage or the ages that we're trying to inhibit here, in terms of the number of offenses
I
they
think
committed.
you might find we're closer to them than you would think. However, our African-American population might be a lot higher than some of these where their Hispanic population is gonna be a lot higher. Their minority population is gonna be a different minority. But nevertheless, still, some of the educational attainment and some of those issues that we see in Jackson, you may well find in these communities. Or we may be better. Or we may be worse.
Well,
Depends on what community you look at.
But I guess my question is where have you done that? Have
No.
you compared us
No.
to what those are?
No. But
That's all.
Any other questions from council?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Dr. Lake, certainly I don't have a crystal ball and know how the vote will take place in regard to the curfew. Will the truancy area continue on if this curfew fails? Is that something that, because I'm certainly more interested in the truancy efforts during the daytime.
yes, sir.
And I just was wondering if this does not pass, is everything completely
No.
dead, or is the truancy
would
will
not
be a
think so.
separate part and will continue on?
As I tell you, I think it's a total picture. I think we need to deal with youngsters 24 hours a day. And I think that's a very important piece of the day piece. Yes, sir.
I had a question for, is it
Go ahead,
Captain
Council.
Corley? If I may, I assume that no additional officers will be hired in this effort.
I don't know of any funding part of this as far as hiring additional officers.
Okay.
But,
I can
there-
probably tell
there
you
certainly
no.
will be, as we grow as a department, and there will be training in this, no doubt,
Okay,
for
that was
each
my
officer.
that was my next
Yes.
question, when you talk about training, what will be done differently? That will-
As with any time there's a new ordinance or state law or case law that comes down, legal bulletins will be put out and issued to every officer, and then in-service training or roll call training on each individual ordinance or statute, so the officers understand it and then know how to go about enforcing it, and any procedurally aspects that we have within the department of how to go about enforcing that law.
Okay,
So
very
there
good.
will be some training.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely.
Question.
You finished, Councilman?
I am.
Okay. Councilman Uday.
There is a question in regards to the financial end of it. The Safe Neighborhood Committee that group had put together a financial package to this particular ordinance as well. Can you explain to me, I think it was somewhere around $250,000. Can you explain what those numbers were?
Sure, that was opening up a center where they would go, and that dealt with the truancy issue. If they're truant, they would go to a facility that would be staffed jointly by the police and the school system. We are not proposing that. We are proposing that they would go, that they would be handled as it is in the ordinance, and then they would go to juvenile court services to the detention center. If the parent can't be found, the youth isn't cooperating, the parent isn't cooperating, they can't get them home, they would take them there kind of as the last choice. And juvenile court services has assured us they do not need to hire any additional people to do that. So that, we're not proposing any additional money on the city side.
I have an additional question in regards to the ordinance itself. One of the things that I had noticed was there is a difference in the way we are handling 18-year-olds and younger than 18-year-olds, 17, 18, and 16 or 17 and younger. Why such a difference?
That is to be consistent with state law. The state law separates them.
That's great. Certainly with the intermediate driver's license laws and things, there are different timeframes that 16-year-olds can be out and about than 17-year-olds can by state law.
So we are consistent with the state law and the driver's license
So,
ages.
so basically, this ordinance is directed by the state of Tennessee in how we should enact an ordinance like this, is that correct?
There is also with the driver's license, intermediate driver's license law that governs juveniles, there's also a curfew statute that is applicable to only certain counties, it only applies to certain counties, but it is a model.
So it's just a model? I mean,
Correct.
we could amend this model as we needed to.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other? Councilman Wallace.
If I'd like to address a couple of the points that Ms. Dahlstrom pointed out as far as the students being out after hours, coming from a ball game or going to Sonic afterwards. If they're coming home from a ball game, they're okay. But she mentioned, going out to eat afterwards, which I think is, a fairly popular thing to do for students. Does that put them in, if they're getting home after 11, are they in trouble there?
Well, what they would do, and Captain Corley, you may want to address this, if they stopped a student, they would, if they're not with their parent or with an authorized adult, they call the parent, and if the parent says that they were eating and that's okay, and now they're coming home, then they would go home and call when they got home. So,
That's
I
great.
mean, there's a provision to deal with that.
That's some of the reason why there was a discretionary aspect placed into the proposed ordinance, instead of officers have to do A, B, and C, because there's gonna be situations where there needs to be some discretion made in the field.
So
Okay,
we addressed her issue.
The same thing regarding the movies, twilight, midnight showing, then if they say they're coming home from the movies, then the officer would say, okay,
Sure.
fine.
And she
see you
calls,
later.
they call home and they say, yes, they have permission, so they'll be fine.
Okay.
Well, wait, if they were going to the movie, they would be out past curfew if it's a midnight showing. So would they be allowed to go to the movie and finish the movie and then go home, or?
We can enforce that however, but I do believe it is, as far as the discretionary aspect of it, because the priming point there is that the officer's gonna, if we learn this is a juvenile, under 18, out at a certain time, contact mom and dad. Mom and dad says, I gave them permission to do this, they're gonna be here, then they're coming right back home. There's where that's what we're gonna act upon. It's where we can't find mom and dad, or they say, no, they shouldn't be out, they're supposed to be at home in bed. There's where the issue arises.
Let me
Okay,
ask,
any other?
let me ask a question so that, and this has to do with the ordinance itself as well. Under restrictions, section 3, it says, it shall further be unlawful for a parent or of a minor to knowingly permit or by inefficient or insufficient control allow such, so on. What do we mean by that? I mean, or efficient, or by efficient or insufficient control? Is that, are we making some sort of statement that we might not should be making?
I guess I want to get you to repeat the question.
Well, the question is, there's a piece of language in here which we are somewhat recognizing the adult as out of control. And which may be true, but should we have that in the language? And that's section 103 restrictions, third item, first line, knowingly permit or by inefficient or insufficient control allow. Would we be best, could we strike that particular piece of language and just say, if the parent knows the minor's out, doesn't matter?
I think the purpose of the language is Dr. Lake was just referring to, is the neglect aspect of the juvenile. If once the officer tries to make contact with parent and parent doesn't care and knowingly doesn't act to take control of that minor or give permission or authority over that minor, that's what that is there for now. If you have some concerns about the actual wording and language, that may be something for Mr. Cobb's office.
Do we have our attorney here now?
So, I think they drafted that, but I'm not sure, but I think that's the purpose and the intent of that language.
Mayor, if I could make a statement.
Sure, go ahead.
We're fooling ourselves if we say we don't have a problem with our kids in the community. If this is not the answer, what is the answer? We said we need our parents to be parents and step up to the plate and make sure kids are gonna be home at a proper time. But if we, you know, we vote this down, I know it's a lot of issues that we dealing with that have a lot of questions that's unanswered, but we need to put some in place. I don't know what it's gonna be, what it's gonna take, but we're gonna have to come together in this community. And I think every time we have some problems, it's about how we treat the kids in the north, how we treat the kids in the south. We gotta realize we got a problem with kids overall in this city. Whether it's the kids hanging out in the parking lot in the north that we're not doing anything about, yes, something need to be done about it. It's the kids walking the streets over on the other side of town, it's something need to be done about it. So, you know, we're gonna have to come together and come up with some solution to get control of our kids. If it's putting the truancy in place first and revisit this later on, let's do that. We're gonna have to put something in place, or parents have to step up to the plate and make sure kids are being home at a proper time. But right now, we got some concerns in this city, and kids are hanging out too late, you know. And like I said, the parties, go visit some of the parties, you know. I'm out riding because I DJ, I do a lot of the parties out here. I would like to invite some other council members to go out at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and see these kids out. Just get in your car and ride and see, that's a problem out there. And they drinking, they doing things they shouldn't be doing, and mamas and dads at home sleep. So, you know, if we don't do this, we need to sit down at this board, you can sit down together, let us come up with a solution and say, this is what we're gonna put in place. This is not the solution, but it's time for us to stop overlooking and giving passes to all our parents, not black parents, not white parents, but giving pass to all these parents and say, it's okay for your kids to be out or to do certain things and get away with it. But right now, we need to do something in the city to get control of our youth.
Okay, any other questions?
Mayor, I did have some questions for Juvenile Court Services.
Thank you, Dr. Lake.
Good morning. Amy Jones, right?
Yes, Amy Jones, Director of Juvenile Court Services.
Amy,
for County.
how long have you been in that position?
October, sir, of 2009.
Okay, and you served on the Neighborhood Task Force as well and helped craft what's before us now?
I served on the committee that developed this curfew, yes.
Okay. And I believe Dr. Lake answered this question. There will not be any additional personnel in your office that will be hired to help us with this, correct?
That's correct. As the way the ordinance would be handled through our office, the first offense is just a warning letter. So that's not something that requires an extra person. We have a clerical like docket coordinator position, and she will send out those letters. For the children who come through the detention center, they will be, once this is in effect, then the violations of the curfew would be a status offense, and those young people would process through the detention center like we would any other status offense right now. So we don't anticipate any additional staff needing to be hired.
And currently, there are no after-school programs run through Juvenile Court Services, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And to the parent, I guess, whose child may be in this situation for whatever reason, if they were to ask, well, what services can you provide? What would be that answer?
For a youth who has violated curfews
Right.
or just in general. It would depend on what all issues were around that. We try to treat every interaction with every young person as a possibility for intervention where it's needed. If, for example, some of the data that we've seen, we know that a lot of curfew violations involve alcohol.
Right.
If a young person comes to us and we know that information, then we have programs like our ASEP program, or for those of you who don't know, that's Alcohol Safety and Education Program, where we would send them through that program. Of course, Judge Little has the final discretion about where they go, but if she agrees with that plan, then they could go through an ASEP class. If it's an issue of possible gang involvement, then we have programs through Juvenile Court Services that address that. So it would depend on that specific issues as to what we would recommend for them.
So you're saying this goes beyond just the enforcement. You are here to help those children?
Oh, absolutely. Everything that we do, we approach from, like I said, an intervention standpoint, where we're not an agency in juvenile law. It is not meant to punish. It is meant to rehabilitate and to make positive changes. So that's how we approach this, just like we approach our other cases.
Okay, we'll hold you to that. Thank you very much.
Do the best we can.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have just one more point of clarification. Captain Corley, this curfew takes us from a reasonable suspicion standard where an officer could just walk up and do a voluntary meet and greet, hey, what are y'all doing out? You know, maybe y'all need to think about getting home, to a probable cause standard, which is they're actually committing a crime just by the basis of being 16 or 17.
I want to clarify that, and it's a good question. Officers can make contact with anyone, juvenile or adult, without any reasonable suspicion or probable cause, can say, hey, may I talk to you? They have to have reasonable suspicion to detain them for any length of time, a reasonable amount of time, to find out information to make sure they're not committing an offense, whether it be curfew or anything else. They have to have probable cause to go beyond that and actually cite or arrest, okay? So, an officer can speak with a juvenile if they reasonably believe that they're between the ages of 13 and 17 and out after the time period, then that would be reasonable suspicion if the curfew is passed to stop and detain and make sure that they are of age or not. Once they ascertain their age and that they are out beyond the period that's outlined by the curfew, then that would be probable cause to take one of the steps. We're gonna call parents, we're gonna cite, we're gonna do one of the other things.
So my answer is, answer to my question is yes. We heighten the standard by passing this. An officer can automatically detain somebody because
Once they know that they're 16.
because they look too young.
Once they have reasonable suspicion that they're 13 to 17.
And reasonable suspicion is enough for a reasonable ordinary officer to look at somebody and say, they look like they're 16, I'm going to detain them.
That'd be correct.
And just for clarification, it's not reasonable suspicion that they're committing a crime. It's reasonable suspicion that they're
Well, because
under 16
if
to
the ordinance
17.
is passed, correct, Councilman,
Right.
if the ordinance is passed, then that would be an offense, so
Right.
that would be reasonable suspicion that they're violating the ordinance.
Yeah, okay. But not that they're committing a criminal offense, but
No.
reasonable suspicion that they're 16 or 17 or.
Correct, reasonable suspicion that they're violating a city ordinance, not that they're committing a state crime.
Okay, thank you, Captain. Any other questions from council? Councilman Lawley?
Yeah, before Captain Curley gets back, if we pass this ordinance, we're gonna be restricting the freedom of some of our students, who's 17 or younger. And that concerns me a little bit. But, you know, make sure I'm sure on what you're saying is regardless of what they're doing, if the police officer calls the parent says, that's okay, that's what they're supposed to be doing.
I wouldn't say that, I'm saying that
Well, if it's reasonable, if they're
the
robbing
aspect
something,
of
then
the-
obviously the parent says it's okay, you're not gonna let them go, but.
Yes, the aspect of the enforcement part of the ordinance allows for the discretion that if they're 2 blocks from home and on the way home when we stop them, that officer certainly has the discretion to allow them to go without being cited. They also have the discretion not to have mom come there and pick them up. Maybe we can allow them to go ahead and go home. There's a latitude of discretion there. So the enforcement part of it ranges from making sure parents know where they are and either getting them home or parents come get them, citing them if we need to into court, or if it gets to the point, transport to juvenile detention for juvenile court services.
Yeah, my concern there, I guess, is that for the small percentage that are causing the crimes and everything, we're restricting the freedom for everybody else, and that concerns me a little bit. So, and that's why I just want to make sure that as long as the student is doing whatever he's supposed to be doing, then they're okay. And that's what you're telling me basically, is that.
Correct. If they're meeting those exceptions that are outlined in the ordinance, you know, they're coming home from work, all those things, it'll just be merely if the officer stops them based on the reasonable suspicion and finds out that they're within that exception range, then that's the end of the encounter.
The first reporting period back to council from our first reading was 30 days, 90 days?
It was
Remember?
90 days.
The 90 days, okay. All right. Thank
Did
you
each
for
of the
that.
councilmen get the statistical information that you asked for broke down by crime?
Okay, any other questions from council?
Mayor, I'd just like to make a comment.
Sure.
This curfew, as we're facing it today, you know, it's not perfect, and it's, far from it. There are other little things that need to be made, changes and so forth, that need to be made, and as has been indicated, some of these things will come about as we go along with this curfew and find out what it does that we like and what we'd like to add and so forth. But there's a lot of good things it does. And I think one of the most important things, it will make us as parents and those that are our children become more responsible. Now, it's you know, it's not just like we want it, but it's a step in the right direction. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments from council? If not, is there a motion for approval on second reading?
I move we approve.
Have a motion made for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any additional discussion from council? If not, council, please vote.
And the motion fails with 3 in favor, 5 against, and 1 abstaining.
Okay, item 2, your second reading is consideration of ordinance to amend Title 8, Chapter 1 of the City Code of Jackson, Tennessee regarding liquor zones.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
Just to reiterate, this is the second reading. It's a housekeeping type of issue. And I think I explained previously, this is to amend Title 8, Chapter 1, concerning the 6 liquor zones, of which there are 2 stores per zone. And previously, by mistake, the ordinance did not cover all 6 zones. It only covered the restriction, location restriction for liquor zone 1 and 2 through 4. And we have made that correction so that now all 6 zones are covered by the location restriction as it pertains to a church, edifice, school, public park, etc.
Motion to accept.
Have a motion for approval. Second. Discussion. Council, please vote.
And the vote is unanimous.
Item 7, new business. Consideration of resolution to the City of Jackson opposing legislation adversely affecting Jackson Madison County General Hospital. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion approved. Second. Any discussion? Council, please vote.
And the vote passes 8 to 1.
Item 2 is consideration of ordinance to amend Title 9, Chapter 3, relative to passenger vehicles for hire. Is there a motion for approval?
Came in a committee, so it doesn't require.
Okay, is there a second to the committee recommendation?
Second.
Have a second. Discussion?
Mayor, just say this has been about a year's worth of work by our committee just to bring in line, hoping that we can open up more for vehicles for hire, and there's been a lot going into it through our attorney and bring it in line with other cities, and hopefully we can have service here in the city. So it's just an update to this ordinance.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Mayor,
Sure.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I would go a step further first to thank Chairman Hayes for his leadership in this, and also for the tireless work of Ms. Teresa Luna and Captain Corley in their dedicated effort. This has been an ordinance that's been in the year in the making, with the idea to streamline the process to make it more effective for limousines and also taxi cabs to operate within the city of Jackson.
I'll second.
Councilman Brooks, yeah.
I'll defer, I was gonna thank them as well.
Okay.
It's been done
I'll
properly.
second
Any other comments or discussion? If not, council, please vote.
And the vote. And the vote is unanimous.
Item 3 is consideration of motion to approve the application for certificate of public convenience and necessity submitted by Dennis E. Blaylock for AIM limousine service. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve it.
Motion second. Any discussion? Council, please
I do
vote.
want to make sure that one thing, this is, he is filing this under the old law.
Yes.
But since our law revolves annually, he's going to be filing next year again. Is that correct? question for later. We'll talk
You
about
know,
that later.
I don't really know the answer to that. I haven't thought
Okay,
about
we'll
that.
talk about that later.
But
Thank
this
you.
is under the old law.
Yeah.
And he has complied with the $50 fee, and he's paid approximately 50-some dollars for the public notice.
Right.
He's done everything.
Councilman Wallace.
Does the tax cap committee review this and make a recommendation on it ahead of time for us?
No, we researched that. It doesn't call
Doesn't
for
fall
that.
under
Section
the
9302 just says a certificate of public convenience and necessity under the old law, reviewed by the police department and processed by myself.
Okay, so it has been reviewed by the police department then?
Yes, it has.
But nobody's recommended approval or, to us on it?
Well, it doesn't call for that in here. If you read section 9302 under the old law, I haven't read the new law, it just says any vehicle for hire must file a certificate of public convenience and necessity.
Councilman Wallace, that was one of the loopholes that we tried to tighten up during the process. That was one of the things that we had to address during the process.
Is that something that, I'm not for this one, obviously, but I would like to have a recommendation from the tax cap committee in the future. Is that something we can change to be able to do?
It's been changed, I
It's been
believe.
changed to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Discussion, council, please vote.
And the vote is unanimous.
Item 4 is consideration of proposed sale of surplus property located at 7 Lebark Cove for $4,000. Al?
This, in our agenda meeting, we discussed the process there on surplus property, and we did receive competing bids, and thanks to Sam Dawson in my absence, the process involved bidding it all the way up to $9,700. And that was awarded to Ms. Lauren McMillan yesterday. The process calls for the public notice to be placed, and then after the 10-day period, if there are competing bids that up it by 10% or more, a bid off is held, and Mr. Dawson conducted that, and it was bid all the way up to $9,700, which more than covers our $3,900 that we had in it as far as delinquent taxes and demo lien.
Okay, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Second, discussion, council, please vote.
And the vote is unanimous.
Item 5 is consideration of amendment to the CDGB Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan, Section 108 loan.
Morning, Dave.
Morning, Dave.
Good morning. You've got a resolution before you this morning to amend the Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan for us to amend the 108 loan application that we have approved by HUD. This 108 loan amendment is basically to set up a public infrastructure pool and economic development pool for the two revitalization areas in the city. The projects are eligible under CDBG rules and regulations. And for us to go forward with this amendment, I need an amendment to amend our plan first. I'm just going to open it up for questions right now.
I think the original loan was approved 2005.
Yes.
Okay, and what we're doing here is amending the context of that loan.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from council? for
Mr. Chairman,
David?
within
Yes.
the scope of the amendment, that dollar figure is what, $2.9 million to be split equally between the two districts?
2.9 million.
3.9.
We're allowed up to 5 times our annual entitlement,
Okay.
which has dropped over the years, so it's 2.992,
So it's just under 3 million by a few
which
dollars.
would be split equally among the two districts.
For infrastructure improvement?
And economic development projects as well.
Would this be under your umbrella?
It will be, but when we get ready to do the public offering, then HUD will handle the public offering, and they will work closely with the city attorney and the finance person at the city, which I assume will be Al. And they will handle that financial side. That's where your expertise is, but yes.
Thank you. I think it's a major step that we're trying to undertake this morning with respect to infrastructure and improvements within these two districts, the west and east part of Jackson, which are the older parts of the city. And I fully support this amendment.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councilman Evans.
Mr. Dave, just real quick, can you tell me what economic development, what that entails? Is that gonna be?
Well, that's why we set up an economic development pool for future projects, because I understand there was some interest in that. I can't tell you exactly the projects, but economic
What
development.
types of
You'll be
projects?
able to provide business loans, you'll be able to possibly do retail development center. Of course, the key here on economic development activities, of course, we still have the job requirements.
They have to show so many jobs created.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions,
Mayor,
Councilman
I
Wallace?
have a comment.
Councilman
Is there
Wallace is
questions?
recognized.
Mayor, I just had a comment, as it relates to the Summer Youth Employment Program. There will be a deficit, this year in that, and I believe you've assured us that the city will try to plug in that gap.
The city will attempt to plug the gap in, however, I think through additional funding through Department of Labor and Workforce Development. I think those funds will continue to come down from Washington. However, we are committed to maintain our existing funding for that youth employment program, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Any other questions or comments from
Question.
council?
When we're talking about the community revitalization, we're talking about the employment tag to this particular package. Would you explain to me the number of employees that would have to be created, and for how long would this employment have to last?
For every $35,000 spent on an economic development project, one job has to be created.
And that has to stay in effect for how long? Or does it have to stay in effect for any length of time?
It has to be a permanent job, not tied to construction. I'm not exactly sure on that, but we kind of look at the length of our plan, which is 5 years. But I'll find that answer out.
So for the $3 million, we would have to have how many jobs created? 100?
I had to calculate.
Less than
that.
100, but 70?
Right.
Something
But
like that.
I really think that half of it, there are community public infrastructure needs. And one of the reasons we looked at that was in the past, we've had to piecemeal public infrastructure over several years. And with inflation, that has cost us more. We'll be able to address those with one major project.
Thank you.
Councilman Wallace.
I'm good, thank you.
You've been trying to get the mic here for the last 5 minutes. You sure? Yeah. Okay, all right, good. All right. Any other questions or comments from council? If not, is there a motion for?
So moved. Second.
Motion, second. Discussion. Council, please vote.
Motion passes 8-1.
Number 6, board appointments.
Consistent.
Board appointments for the airport board, the appointment of Essie Lovelady, who's replacing Delita Johnson. Equalization board appointment of Betty Hearn.
Move for the approval by acclamation, or adoption of the whole slate.
Okay,
Second.
have a motion of second. Council vote, please.
The vote is unanimous.
Number 7 is consideration of budget amendments. Mr. Karen.
This morning, we have 3 budget amendments for consideration. The first one is the Federal Equitable Sharing Fund. The funds for capital purchases will come, the Metro Narcotics Units receive money for jointly working federal cases that must be used for operational or equipment expenses that are not in the current budget, and have provided you a list of the equipment that we purchased with these funds. That amendment is the amount of $42,462. You want to vote on these separate, or?
What's the council's preference? You want to take them separately? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion for approval for that particular amendment?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Discussion. Council, please vote.
The vote is unanimous.
Okay, the second amendment that we have is for Civic Center Capital. Civic Center is in need of a stage lift to be replaced for the main stage. It broke and needs 3 of the 4 main leveling cables to be replaced to be operational for events. Total cost of replacement will be $10,000. So this will increase the Civic Center Capital by $10,000.
Move the approval.
Second.
Motion made and approved. Any discussion? Council, please vote.
The vote is unanimous.
Okay. Third, we have the Recreation Department asking for capital in the amount of $30,000. This will be used for purchasing 2 mowers, 1 front cut mower, and 1 tractor to pull back wing mowers. Existing equipment will be transferred to the golf course for use at this facility, and new equipment will remain with groundskeeping.
A motion for approval.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion made. Second?
Second.
A second. Discussion. Council, please vote.
Motion passes 7-2.
The last amendment that you have for today is also Recreation Capital, an amendment to transfer $14,500 to be used for golf course improvements.
So moved.
I have a motion made. Second?
Second.
Second. Council, please vote.
Motion passes 6-3.
Thank you.
Okay, final item is consideration of invoices over $10,000.
So moved.
We have a motion made by
Second.
Councilman Bray, second. Any discussion? Council, please vote.
Vote passes 8-1.
There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
No.